In this video we will take a closer look at my home-built sailing canoe. So I wanted to build a boat myself. I wanted to build something that would fit on the roof of my van and not need trailing around. I also, when I had my 14-foot sailing boat, I found that I was only on one half of it at a time, so I thought it was a bit of a waste to have a boat twice as wide as you need to have. So I built this, and it was based on a dory kind of style hull. I thought that the Atlantic dories could take the sea quite well, being small boats as well. So I built this as a kind of dory-shaped, hard-shined boat. She's got an extra layer of glass matting on the bottom. She's got sharpie bows, got a bit of shear, and I changed the configuration of sails and outriggers and things as I kind of went, because the idea when I built this was that I was going to experiment with different configurations rather than buy, or order, or I didn't want to sort of build a stock boat. I wanted to kind of put my own input into it, essentially. So that's why I went the way I went, and I've actually thoroughly enjoyed the process, learned a lot, and actually as I've refined things and they're working better, it's actually all been, I think, very much worth it. So when I built this, I built it in Cornwall, on top of a hill in a shed on my archery range, and here we are. This is where I built it. It's built in marine ply. It took a few months because I had slow setting epoxy. It would have been quicker if I had the quick setting epoxy, but it doesn't matter. I needed time to think about what I was doing as well. So here we are going together. You can see the shear in there. We've got buoyancy fore and aft and athwart. I've added lots of strengthening points like this one here, also others and different tie points around the boat. I also added a sort of Polynesian kind of Maori stem post made out of mahogany to give it a bit of multicultural flavour. Underneath, you can see here I added bilge runners and a skeg. At the back of the boat I also added like a little English kind of punt feel, bit of trim, and you can see the Ketch rig on there. And here was our first dip in the sea for a test. Launched it week on the Hereford River, which went very, very well. So the first thing to test was the canoe. So I took that for a bit of a paddle on the Hereford River a few times. Actually, it's very nice and stable, easy to paddle, easily to take two people for a paddle very quickly just by spinning it off the roof of the van. I also did a bit of coastal paddling here, you can see, on a little beachy. So this was part of the plan, is to just use it as a canoe. I'll be going over a few different things. I'll be going over this control surfaces, the different rigs, and also the outrigger. So we'll get into that now. So the first thing that we did was some basic sailing testing, and I built these improvised but very sturdy buoyant outriggers as well. So this was the first test I had done. I used a jib off of my 14-foot sailing boat. On the front I had my Ketch rig, which is an improvised jury rig. On the back here you can see, which I still use today, a bit more improved. You can see my very early sailing steering oar in the Viking position there. That was the forerunner of what I've got now. So there we go, first test. You can see in this still my clamp on leadboard holder. I didn't know where it needed to be roughly, so I made a clamp on one. It didn't stay on very well, it moved, it wasn't very strong, but it worked long enough for me to get an idea of where I needed it. So here is the first sail, proper mainsail size sail. It was a bit of an army poncho, most of an army poncho, and that worked alright actually. It sort of got me the parameters of the boat sorted, and I'll go into that in a bit more. Here is the Mark 1 steering oar. So sort of Viking style on the side, but with a Norwegian tiller as well, and you can see it raises for beaching. Just at different angles to set up there, just using a PVC pipe as my sort of upright shaft, as it were. So that's a look at it from my steering position. So this is the proper rig I made. It still will have a bit of a touch, but it's much more proper than the poncho. So this was a configuration I planned to sail the canoe in, just without outriggers at all. It's just sort of day sail, safe water. Here you can see the Mark II leeboard, now improved from the clamp-on-y one. This was alright. You can see it got the leeboard lower, which is an old Windsor for its dagger board. It got nearer the water, so it wasn't so bad. This is another video of testing. This is Helford River, just going past the entrance to the very famous Frenchman's Creek. And this is a test with the tarpaulin, see-through tarpaulin sail, which is quite handy because you can you haven't got a blind spot because you can see through it as well. But also you'll see that it was before I put a boom on it, so it's a soft-footed version, which also worked quite well. I just liked the reefing was quicker on the boom, so I decided to stick with the boom in the end. And you can see my steering clamped on the acca there with a bungee, and that just holds my steering exactly where it stays straight. I can adjust it just by pushing it forward or back, and it's also accessible from the front part of the boat, so if I had someone else with me, they could also steer the boat from the front. That kind of works very well, actually. I wouldn't change that for the world now. It's like autopilot. I've got my hands free for photography, and just generally don't have to be steering the boat all the time. So that works very well. This is on the Helford River, as I said. Yeah, I did Frenchman's Creek. You can see the outriggers working really well. Now I had a problem with this. I had a problem with this Mark II leeboard. It was very good. It did actually create a lot of turbulence when it was leaned over that way on the starboard side on the port tack. But I had a real big problem, which is prevalent. You can see this now in this clip. You can see how much is twisting over in the gusts. How it didn't actually break, I don't know. It was a slow motion. It was bending over a lot. It was making all sorts of noises. It never broke, but I realised that it wasn't going to last very long. So I decided to go with what most people do, is put it across the boat on like a fort, as it were. So you'll see that here, and you'll see the new outrigger as well. But hang on. First things first. So here's the new super strong leeboard, and it's adjustable. I can move it forward and backwards on the boat very easily. It's perpendicular to the boat, so it's all very simple for the angle. And although I need to make a deeper, longer leeboard, really, ideally in the end, which I haven't got around to yet, but there's always got to be something to be working on, isn't there? But you can see it works very well. Works very well indeed. This is the rig. This is on Stivians Lake. Some of my testing I did do on Stivians Lake and on the Upper Helford, so that it was safe, because I was obviously sort of messing around with things. So that was why I'm testing in certain places as well. It's always worth being sensible. Don't just head out to sea with something you haven't really, thoroughly tested and checked out. So here we are, Stivians Lake. Yes. That's this sail plan still, pretty much. And although the freeboard is low, the worst I've ever shipped is like a cup full of water over the side at one time. It's pretty good. So as I look aft, you can see me Ketch rig arrangement again, and again you can see the leeboard. That's been just beefed up a little bit. I put it like a bracing plate on it. here it is, the new lee board. Oop. There you go. That's what she looks like now. Bit sleeker. 4 foot the new one, the outrigger. I said lee board, I meant outrigger. So here we are on board again. This is the kind of Health River mouth, North Bank. Now you can see I've got quite a bit of a kit on board here. I'm now camping and doing sort of more sort of beta testing out, sort of on the sort of fair weather out on the ocean sea. So here we are. We've got anchor on board. I've got a drogue. I've got flares. I've got I've got a handheld radio. I've got water. I've got camping equipment. The boat's got built-in buoyancy, and I want to bring up a point that the reason why I don't need when I built the new outrigger there, I actually built 2, but I just tested it with one, and I found that one gave the boat plenty of stability, and I decided that actually sailing with one was kind of adequate. It also, even if the boat is fully swamped or I've capsized or anything like that, and it's just full of water, it's still, I have forward buoyancy, aft buoyancy, and buoyancy in the lee, in the outrigger there. So that gives me 3 points of buoyancy. So I should have a boat stable enough to sort of manage back into sheltered waters or to be able to bail, So that's. I have sailed out on in force 4 even in the river still, but without an outrigger, and that was just a little bit more sort of worrying ride, knowing that if I capsized I wouldn't be able to sort of recover it and bail it. It'd be a long swim to the river bank, but again sort of safe, and I've always got buoyancy aid on, and I'm still within the confines of the river when I'm testing. So if you are out there building your own boats, which I thoroughly recommend, do obviously play safe and make sure you're using safety equipment and you're in fair conditions. It's all very well. So if you're in fair conditions and you have a problem, or the wind and forecast is a bit worse than it was supposed to be, then your sort of things are just slightly worse than what you're used to. Whereas if you just go out when it is already a bit worse and then it gets a lot worse, you put yourself in a much more dangerous situation. So just sort of risk assess what you're doing. But I thoroughly recommend building your own small vessels. You learn a lot. I've learned so much from building this that I would never have learned if I just bought something. So I wouldn't have it any other way now. And in fact, this is the first boat I've ever built. I've never built a boat before this. This is just sort of learn as you go. Learn as you go. So I definitely recommend it. It's been a very satisfying thing to not only make, but every time I use it, I especially as I've refined it and it's working how I want it to, it is immensely satisfying. So also camping is big enough to sleep in. I made it big enough so I could lay down in it. So I can camp on beaches or anchor up a shelter creek. I can camp next to, this is a wreck on Frenchman's Creek, so you can go really exploring. This is camped up on Witham Quay at the end of Frenchman's Creek, so I can really get to different places that you could never, it's harder to get to any other way. This is using the cockpit tent out of my 14-footer, so I'll sort of make a basic shelter on board. Saves trying to find a space to put a tent up as well. Makes life that bit easier. So this is a camp, Puncheon's Cave, I think. So this is me on board, having slept aboard all night. This is me on board, waiting out the tide. I was waiting for a few hours for a fair tide up river, so a cup of tea and a sort of just to chill out and a lay down in the back of the canoe. This is me underway. Alfred. So this is the last video of today. This is a trip up the river. Again, you can see my steering system bungeed off, autopilot. I've got my lee board right up here because I'm heading downwind, and I've actually got a bit of fair tide, so I think there's a pretty deceptively, I'm going a lot faster than it looks over the ground. and you'll see how quickly there's a distant channel marker coming up fast. So I kind of like this clip and the sound of water. Kind of nice. Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this foray around my canoe and why I'm doing things the way I do them. You can understand how it's sort of evolved the way it is. So I want to put a different leadboard on. I'll probably change the rig at some point for something a little bit more substantial, maybe with more reef points. Other than that, I'm pretty happy with everything. So that's really good. There we go. There she is on her little trolley. Well, thanks for watching. Like it if you liked it. In my next aquatic video, I will be kayaking around Mullion Island in southwest Cornwall.